All right, let's jump right into this macro history explainer. We're going to take a staggering 30,000 years of England's evolution and condense it into one seriously fast-paced journey. We'll see exactly how a small, famously rainy island on the edge of Europe completely transformed itself over millennia. To make sense of all this without getting totally bogged down, we're breaking this massive timeline into 4 distinct chapters. 1. Invaders and early foundations. 2. Crowns, parliaments, and laws. 3. Industry and global empire. And 4. World wars to modernity.
But before we really get going, we've got to pause and ask the big question driving this whole explainer. How did a vulnerable nation, one that was constantly conquered by foreign invaders for its first 1,000 years, eventually become the most powerful country on Earth? It's a total paradox.
Just to put the stakes into perspective for you, at its absolute peak, Britain commanded a full 25% of the world's landmass and population. I mean, that scale of global dominance is just wild. But to figure out how they actually got there, we have to go way back to the very beginning. So, Chapter 1, Invaders and Early Foundations, Shaping the Canvas. Early England was basically this vulnerable canvas, just constantly painted over by successive waves of invaders. And what's really fascinating here is how each invasion acted as this violent but honestly vital paradigm shift. You've got the Romans coming in 43 AD to conquer the Celtic tribes. When Rome eventually collapsed, the Anglo-Saxons showed up. Then came the terrifying Viking raid starting in 793, and finally, the super decisive Norman Conquest in 1066. Now, instead of getting bogged down in memorizing battles, the crucial takeaway is what these groups actually left behind. The Romans built the first stone towns, the roads, and a massive tax infrastructure. The Anglo-Saxons gave us the English language itself and unified kings. And the Normans? Well, they pretty much wiped the slate clean, dropping in a super strict feudal hierarchy, massive stone castles, and the true bedrock of common law.
Moving on to Chapter 2, Crowns, Parliaments, and Laws. Forging the state.
So, after 1066, the era of these massive foreign invasions ends and the intense internal struggles begin. We're going to skip right over the minor kings here and focus on the absolute game changers, checking royal power in 1215, a truly devastating plague in 1348, a bloody civil war that literally ended with a king's execution in 1649, and finally, a bloodless revolution in 1688. Take the Magna Carta, for example. It was originally drawn up as a peace treaty between a very unpopular King John and his rebellious barons. And honestly, at first, it was a total failure. But it introduced this incredibly revolutionary idea that stuck around. A monarch's power actually has legal limits. The ruler is not above the law. Then, nature intervened. 40%. Just let that sink in for a second. That is the devastating portion of the entire English population that was wiped out by the first wave of the Black Death starting in 1348. We're talking about entire villages just completely emptied out.
But this horrific death toll inadvertently sparked a massive economic paradigm shift. Because there were suddenly way fewer workers, the surviving laborers realized they actually had tremendous leverage to demand higher wages. This completely shattered the strict Norman feudal system, shifting power toward the peasantry and kicking off the largest redistribution of land ownership in English history.
As society modernized, political tensions totally exploded. After a brutal English Civil War, where King Charles I famously lost his head, and the Glorious Revolution of 1688, England settled into a really unique framework. An unwritten constitution. Instead of one single piece of paper, it's this flexible mix of laws and traditions that successfully balance the power of a growing parliament with a limited crown.
All right, Chapter 3, Industry and Global Empire. Conquering the Globe.
With domestic politics finally stabilizing, England turned its ambitions entirely outward. And man, this era was a total roller coaster. In a super rapid sequence, Britain wins massive global territory in the 7 Years' War, completely loses its American colonies by 1783, but then immediately bounces back by launching the Industrial Revolution and aggressively subjugating India. But wait, before they could industrialize, they actually had to feed everyone, right? The vital agricultural revolution brought in new crops and fertilizers, sparking a massive 5 times increase in output by 1720. And producing that much food meant you didn't need as many farmers. This drove a huge migration of workers straight out of the countryside and right into the cities. So what were they doing in all those cities? Well, this new urban workforce was powering the factories and coal mines of the Industrial Revolution. James Watt's steam engine fundamentally shifted the entire economy. Urban populations exploded, this wildly wealthy merchant class popped up, and a new, politically active working class started demanding rights, essentially taking power away from the old nobility.
Armed with all this incredible industrial wealth, England went on to build its second, even larger empire. And they did this through a complex three-step mix. First, relentless corporate profit-seeking through massive entities like the East India Company. Second, the active utilization of the horrific Atlantic slave trade to power colonial labor. And third, annexing huge swaths of territory, often under the zealous justification of a civilizing Christian mission. Which brings us to Chapter 4, World Wars to Modernity, the Price of Power.
As we hit the 20th century, this incredible run of global dominance finally reaches its absolute limit. The First and Second World Wars completely rewrote Britain's relationship with war. Unlike those distant skirmishes of the Victorian era, these conflicts brought unimaginable slaughter right into the lives of everyday citizens. It transformed combat from this idea of imperial glory into just unprecedented national trauma, pushing the economy right to the brink of ruin. Honestly, nothing captures the existential stakes of this era better than the desperate Battle of Britain in 1940. Facing an imminent German invasion, just a tiny handful of Royal Air Force pilots narrowly saved the nation. As Prime Minister Winston Churchill famously put it, never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. They survived, yeah, but the sheer cost left the empire entirely exhausted.
The aftermath of these conflicts fundamentally changed the nation forever. A shattered economy forced the dismantling of the empire, with nations like India and Ireland achieving their independence. Back at home, Britain built a sweeping domestic safety net, including the National Health Service. And more recently, the country has been wrestling with things like high immigration rates, modern identity, and sovereignty, which culminated in the highly polarizing Brexit vote.
So from a fractured island of Celtic tribes to a globe-spanning empire to a modern nation navigating the crazy complexities of a post-Brexit 21st century, if there's one thing England's history proves for sure, it's that survival requires ruthless, constant reinvention. So the ultimate question we're left with now is this: will the island that once shaped the entire world find a new way to lead it? Or is its most influential chapter already written? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.